Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to our webinar on supplier collaboration. My name is Henry Majid from 2 Degrees, and I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon by our special guests, Laura Babbs from ASDA and Matt Wilson from GSK. Thank you and welcome both, and to you, our audience. Just a couple of pieces of housekeeping to begin with. We will be recording the whole webinar and making this available to everybody. So if I could ask you to mute your microphone, that would be very much appreciated. Secondly, as part of the question and answer session, we will be inviting you to submit your questions to Matt and Laura. Please do this using the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screens. If you don't see the chat box on the bottom right-hand side, you'll see a chat icon at the top right that you can click to make this visible. You should also be able to see the webinar slides. If you're not able to see this right now, on the top left-hand side you should see 3 tabs, one saying Quick Start, one saying Event Info, and one saying Webinar Slides. It's Webinar Slides that you should click on. Before I ask Laura and Matt to take to the stage, I wanted to spend a few moments setting background context to today's webinar. Business and society in the first half of the 21st century faces a combination of unprecedented threats and opportunities, at root caused by the explosion in the global population as it heads towards 9 billion. But within that, most importantly, the extra 3 billion middle-class consumers. The opportunity for growth is obvious, and so are the threats to security of supply of key commodities, from coffee, tea, and chocolate at one end to rare earths at the other. A multiple of factors are contributing to these threats, from climate change, shifting demographics away from the countryside to the city, pollution, soil erosion, and of course the overexploitation of resources held in common, from fresh water to fish, and the ecosystems of natural capital that ultimately underpin healthy economies and societies. What has only recently come into focus is how the impact of these challenges are being exacerbated by 2 other factors unique to our times. Firstly, the extended arm's length and fragile nature of our supply chains. The push for efficiency, the focus on core competencies, and the outsourcing and offshoring of all else in the search for lower costs has meant that businesses are less in control of the products they manufacture and sell than ever before. And of course, it is in their supply chains, not their direct operations, that most of the risks and impacts of a business exist. Add to that the ability of global digital communications to connect brands to what happens in the nethermost regions of their supply chains and hold them responsible for disasters, incompetence, and unethical behaviour, and you have the perfect storm. Into this context, 3 concepts have come to prominence as essential in securing the opportunity and mitigating the risks: transparency, collaboration, and innovation. Reports from earlier in the year emphasised these, from BCG, which showed that 90% of executives believed that collaboration was essential for sustainable practices. And transparency, also seen through the State of Green Biz report and Ethical Core earlier in the year, showing just how common these terms are and how they're being used increasingly by CEOs. In theory, they sound like the answer. In a world in which these challenges, often held in common with other parties, sit largely at arm's length in the supply chain, then the answers have to be found through greater transparency and deeper collaboration. But this is not easy to achieve through traditional approaches to supplier management. As Pierluigi Sigismondi, Chief Supply Chain Officer for Unilever, put it to us, with 410,000 Tier 1 suppliers alone, this is a truly massive undertaking which can only be achieved if we move away from a hub-and-spoke model with Unilever at the centre to creating an enabling web connecting up suppliers so they can collaborate with each other. At 2 Degrees, we have pioneered the first managed service to enable customers to collaborate with their suppliers at scale, and more importantly, to allow thousands of suppliers to work with each other in order to cut costs, reduce risks, drive innovation, and build unprecedented levels of trust across a supply base. We call it fully linked collaboration because it creates connectivity and new working partnerships across organizations at an operational level so that engineers, water, waste, and energy managers, technical and packaging specialists from different organizations can work together to address common challenges. What this allows is for best practices that would otherwise remain hidden as exceptions in silos to be surfaced, shared, and normalized across the supply base. We recently ran a survey comparing the experiences for food and drink manufacturers involved in our fully linked collaboration programs with peers who were only engaged through traditional approaches. The results were striking, and I want to share with you some of those key highlights. We see in our collaboration with customers slide that nearly 94% of suppliers using fully linked collaboration felt that they had good or very good levels of trust with their customers, as compared to 41% for those suppliers not using fully linked collaboration. Similarly, we saw that suppliers using fully linked collaboration were more likely to both help others and also share their own best practices. 9 out of 10 felt that they were more willing to share their good ideas through fully linked collaboration compared to 4 out of 10 for those without. Similarly, we see that 59% of suppliers using fully linked collaboration felt that it helped them to make relevant and suitable investments in new technologies compared to 24% who weren't using this. And equally, nearly 60% of suppliers felt that they were making cost savings through fully linked collaboration compared to 41% who didn't have this available to them. Now, enough of me. What you've really come here for is to listen to 2 companies pioneering fully linked collaboration across their supply bases. So let me hand over to our guests. Laura, perhaps you might start by introducing the ASDA Sustain and Save Exchange, sharing your aims and experiences.
Thanks for that, Henry. That was quite an introduction. Hopefully I can give you all some useful insights and it's not all just the same rubbish that you hear everywhere else. So why did we set this up in ASDA? So in about 2012, we realised that while we were doing a lot of work in our own operations, over 90% of our impacts actually lay in the supply chain. And if I'm honest, we didn't know what to do there, how we could really meaningfully make an impact on that. So we went about looking at our business and we identified that our fresh, chilled and frozen business, which is one of the largest part of our businesses, has some of the biggest impacts. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of impacts from moving of the chilled product around the UK and maintaining that chilled supply chain. So we came to 2 degrees and decided to set up a project looking at a knowledge sharing platform and how our suppliers could use that. Unlike some of the others, ASDA ourselves have stayed quite far back from our ASDA Sustain and Save Exchange. We really let our suppliers run the content and ask all the questions. There's everything up there from, have you heard about potential changes to EU pesticides, to the best way to treat potatoes and carrot and water waste. There's a whole range of things up there, everything from customer insight into what do you do with internal colleagues to raise sustainability higher up their agenda. And we've made some pretty impressive savings over the 3 years that the SSE has been running. So our suppliers have made over £4 million worth of savings and have invested over £10 million. That's a great figure when I'm taking back inside ASDA that for every pound we're investing, our suppliers are saving £4. And not only that, they've saved 14,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide in the process. So those all sound like nice big figures, but there's still a lot to go after. So we've got over 1,000 members on the SSE at the moment, and excitingly, over the last year, about 35% of them have been contributing, which is a really high figure. Some of the really scary stats. So members over the last year visited 17,000 times and looked at 75,000 different pages. They shared over 200 case studies last year and raised over 103 questions, which is an awful lot of questions. They've also shared about, if you look at all the case studies and all the information they've put up there, that's £81 million worth of savings that they've shared with us and with each other. Pardon me. And we've tried to do some investigation around, but what's the value of those problems that have been solved? And we've estimated that that's about 1.3 million. So there's some really big figures coming behind it now. But some of the things we learned is that this has taken an awfully long time for people to build trust in ASDA and build trust in the SSE in 2 degrees. One of our main trust components that we've got is the golden rule. So that's for all savings that our suppliers make, they're theirs to keep. It's not something that's brought into trading discussions inside ASDA. It's theirs and it's for their business. And it's, I'll be honest, sometimes challenging getting the traders to understand this, but it's having a more long-term look at our supply chain and making sure that as a business we've got a supply chain that's fit for the future. That's everything from me from now, just a really brief introduction.
Fabulous, thank you, Laura. There's so much in there that I'm sure that our audience will want to dig into. So I will remind the audience that you are very welcome to send us questions through using your chat box. If you could direct them towards the host, that would be helpful. We can collate those and share those in the next part. So next, if I can invite Matt to introduce the GSK Supplier Exchange, your aims and your experiences so far. Matt.
Thanks, Henry. Excuse me. Not unlike ASDA, back in 2010, GSK refreshed its approach to environmental sustainability. And what we found, unsurprisingly, was that about a third of our environmental impact sat within our supply chain. And when we dug a little deeper, of our somewhere between 6,000 and 20,000 suppliers, tier 1 at any one point in time, they all contributed a very small part of the puzzle. So we couldn't just go to the top 10 and fix this problem. So we started to think about how can we begin to engage our suppliers and how can we begin to move the needle on performance. And it took us a long time. We learnt a lot on the way. We worked with our procurement colleagues, but with a global business, we couldn't engage enough procurement colleagues and enough suppliers in the space of time to have any meaningful impact. So if you imagine 20,000 suppliers, 400 procurement colleagues globally, how many conversations and how long those conversations would need to take over and above all the typical conversations that procurement need to have, quality, supply, cost, etc. So we were really struggling to make an impact in this space. And we came to a similar conclusion that we need to do this at scale and we need to bring people together, so we're having fewer conversations but with a much larger audience, and that's where 2 degrees came in. But to be perfectly honest, the business was extremely sceptical. So we engaged a smaller number of our suppliers, 200 suppliers first of all, and we asked them a series of questions, one to prove the case that there was a need to collaborate, and we got some pretty interesting stats coming back from that. I think 95% of the suppliers that we engaged said sustainability was important to them. And when we dug a little deeper, let's say in the topic of energy, we found that only 70% of those had a carbon target in place, and even fewer had an active program. So what that said to us was that, hang on a minute, we've got an operational energy risk here in our suppliers, or to put it another way, an externally managed spend that isn't under control particularly well, that also contributes to our environmental impact. So what can we do about it? And we asked some other questions as well, such as, look, would you be interested in collaborating, learning about new technologies, sharing best practice with other suppliers? And we did this all anonymously because we felt there would be a big trust hurdle to get over. I was delighted actually by the response. Most of our suppliers were forthcoming about who they were and what their thoughts were. Over 90% of them said they were happy to collaborate and wanted to get involved in this initiative. So GSK launched the Supplier Innovation Exchange. We initially approached 200 suppliers for our pilot for 6 months. We ended up with approximately 110 suppliers taking part, 200 people. And over the course of 6 months, savings opportunities disclosed amongst suppliers have been about £10 million, 70,000 tonnes worth of CO2. Suppliers have benefited to the tune of £200,000 directly out of the exchange from reapplying best practice. And we've been able to use it as an opportunity to share what we've learned inside our own operations, where we've reduced our energy consumption by 8% over the last 5 years and reduced our carbon footprint of our operations by 21%, and saving cumulatively about £100 million. So all that has gone into open source collaboration, innovation, supplier to supplier in the web that Henry described, plus enabled us to engage on topics where we know we can have a direct impact, whether that be portfolio energy buying. So how do we leverage GSK's scale with our suppliers to start purchasing energy together? How do we build a case to get someone interested to adopt the energy Kaizen approach that we've pioneered and now replicated in 5 suppliers, where it typically unearths 40% energy reduction opportunities. So for me, it's been a great success. We're at the starting point, and my goal for this year is to grow the exchange to 1,000 suppliers. Thanks, Henry.
Great. Again, thank you very much, Matt. The questions are coming in, so clearly there's a lot of interest out there for what we're talking about. And a reminder to anyone else there who would like to submit questions, please do feel free to send them through the chat box, and we will share them during the course of this webinar. So let me get the questions underway, and this is going to both Laura and Matt. Where you've shared some, sizable savings. You've shared, some what I think could be quite valuable benefits to your organisation. Where do you see this approach taking your company in the future? What's possible? How ambitious can you be?
Who's that to, Henry? Who do you want to start?
Matt, why don't you start?
Well, if I think about the stats that we got back from our initial engagement, and I estimate our suppliers probably spend up to about £400 million on energy, and of that, 30% of them, don't have a target and less have a management program. There's about £120 million worth of cost there that isn't being as managed as well as it could be. Or to put it another way, that's several 100,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide that we might be contributing to the environment unnecessarily. So the thing for me there is I've got great energy around this. How do we grow this to a point where we can really start tackling those big numbers?
I think for me it's pretty similar. So we're probably slightly further ahead than the GSK network that's just been set up. But ours is starting to look into new areas. So how can our suppliers work together to tackle things like food fraud? So as well, we've got all the energy stuff, and that'll just be ongoing. There's always new things coming out. There's always savings that can be made. But there's other areas that our suppliers can collaborate on. And for us in ASDA, it's really built into what we do. Our mantra is everyday low cost equals everyday low price. And we really see this network as a way to help our suppliers deliver that.
Great. Okay, thank you. There's some lofty ambitions there, but some great progress towards that. Where do you feel that fully linked collaboration has provided the most value towards that, Laura?
I think for us it's in the savings that our suppliers have shared with us. So our suppliers that use the SSE don't have to report anything, but throughout the 3-year process, they've started to share with us some of the savings and investments that they've made, and they're big figures, and they're things that they wouldn't have done without the network. And we've driven in investments and in savings £15 million out of our supply base in 2 years, and that's really impressive, especially in the type of world that we live in, where food and retail is under a lot of pressure all the time. So for me, just the costs that have been driven out are things that wouldn't have happened without this network.
Great, thank you, Laura. And Matt, do you have a view?
I think for me, if you look at GSK's mission, it is to help people do more, feel better, and live longer. And the themes at the heart of that around innovation and access. Access to medicine is all about making sure they're preferentially priced so that people can afford them. And innovation is doing it in the smartest way and making sure we've got those new products and medicines. So we've demonstrated there's a link between being more sustainable and more cost effective. I don't have to keep bringing that up anymore. It's a fact. And then the other part is around having all of our suppliers here like this, bouncing ideas from one of the, seeing how to fast track a CHP investment without everybody having to learn it all again, how to lightweight packaging, source responsibly sourced wood fibre, and responsible palm oil, all of these things where traditionally each company on their own would have to learn how to do it. And it would take time. We're able to learn how to do it collectively together, which speeds up that process. So I think it's around innovation and access, or innovation and cost.
Great, thank you, Matt. So one of the questions that's coming in repeatedly from many of our attendees is how you're measuring value. Is that something that you can speak on, Matt?
So we have a number of measures. First and foremost, excuse me, I'm looking for. We set this up as a vehicle to reduce our environmental impact. So I'm looking for carbon reduction. And as I said, we've got a clear link between being more sustainable and saving. So if I'm asking suppliers and our supply chain to invest time in this, I want to know that they're getting benefit from it. So money is obviously, or cost savings are a clear KPI. But slightly more esoteric measures are around trust, and do we believe it's strengthening the business relationship? And we asked our suppliers in the pilot that, and 76% of them thought that the innovation exchange was helping them to build stronger links with GSK. And the other, again, a slightly more esoteric KPI is, are they finding value in it? And 95% of those members also said they found some value in the exchange, which wouldn't have been there otherwise. So some very punchy, carbon cost reduction, but some slightly more esoteric KPIs as well.
Thank you, Matt. So that's one view from the world of pharmaceuticals. How does that reflect what you're seeing in ASDA, Laura?
I think it's very similar. We could almost see, if you change pharmaceuticals for food, you could almost see the same business. It's about having trust with our suppliers. It's about improving that, and then it's a lot about the KPIs of actually how much carbon have we reduced, how much money have we saved. But we also look at a few of the softer ones. So what type of suppliers, what type of businesses have been on there, how can we help other categories, because we split ours down by the different food categories. And is it something, for example, historically our bakery teams haven't been as engaged, but as we've changed what we're doing and what we're talking about, and as sustainability has become more important in their fields, we've seen their engagement go up. So it's for us looking across all the things that Matt mentioned, as well as looking across actually who's on there and what they're doing and how we can help support them.
Great. So this leads me on to the next question then, I think quite nicely, that's come from our audience. Do you, Matt, or Laura, in your companies include in cost negotiations the savings suppliers have achieved through their use of the collaboration network? I know that you referenced the golden rule, Laura, and perhaps you might care to tell us about the way that you're dealing with this.
Yeah, so for us, categorically no. Any saving that they make on the SSE is theirs to keep. It doesn't even have to be disclosed to ASDA. We work a lot, so we have hero traders in our trading teams who are responsible for talking about the SSE, and it gets shared in our business top-to-tops and joint business plans, how well everyone's doing on, or poorly, everyone's doing on the SSE and how we can help develop that. But we decided not to take it into those trading discussions, but more about having the long-term view at looking at our supply chain. Our parent company, Walmart, have decided to do things slightly differently. So they have a sustainability index where they rank people, and then they do take that into trading discussions. Personally, I think our way is much better and much more inclusive, and we've seen much greater savings from the outset. in the way we're doing it.
Great, thank you, Laura. And Matt, what's your view? I can imagine that Plastic Pipeline has a fairly special environment where this could need to be handled appropriately.
To be honest, Henry, our approach is very similar to ASDA. If you take the basic collaboration platform, then anything that people learn or disclose and take away, it is theirs to keep, and we want to encourage that. So we don't actively pursue it, because if you take a long-term view, you know when it comes around to contract renegotiation later on that the more efficient suppliers will be able to offer you the most effective pricing. So you'll get it in the long run. So I see this purely as a capability build, much the same as we'd build capability in other ways through OE or quality or safety. So no, we don't directly go after those savings. We do, however, through the exchange, run some targeted programs where we're very upfront and we say, look, if we can pull together our energy procurement, for example, and leverage scale, there are mutual savings to be had, and that's purely voluntarily. Again, we ask a similar thing, and sorry all my examples around energy, but that's just where we've started. If a supplier wants to share with us what their energy profile is like, and then we put it through our screening tool and then send in GSK resource to do an energy Kaizen, and we identify savings, then up front we'll have had a conversation where we say, hang on, if GSK is making an investment, we want to see some savings back. So we have two approaches. The general environment, it's not pursued. We want to encourage people to disclose and everybody to learn, but then we also have targeted programs where there is a quid pro quo.
Great. Thank you, Matt. So this leads me on to something else that's been coming through from our audience and also in many of the conversations that we have with people that we work with. For both organisations, many of your suppliers would be who you might consider competitors to each other. So what's your experience with suppliers who may, on the face of it, appear to be competitors, actually being willing to work together and collaborate to create value? Matt, why don't you start us off on that?
I think so far from what we've seen, the topic of energy is broad enough and the technology is diverse enough that we haven't really encountered any problems from that perspective. In fact, I've been delighted about how willing people are to share what they've learned and how they approach this. And I think that's where the kind of sense of purpose around reducing the environmental impact comes in. Most people want to do that and therefore want to collaborate in that space. So it's not particularly, and there's nothing there that they're going to get concerned about. I think going forward, as we grow the exchange and we get a even more diverse set of suppliers on there, I think there's even less likely to be an issue. So no, I don't see a problem.
No, okay. And Laura, what's your perspective from food and drink grocery retail?
I think probably the only way to describe it is it's a bit like a school sports day. Everyone really wants to win, but doesn't want to feel like the bad guy that's not cheering on everyone else. So there's obviously some big suppliers in certain categories that we do a lot, as well as all this online activity. We have a lot of in-person activity as well. And certain suppliers won't want other suppliers to come to their sites, which is fair enough, and ASDA would be the same with certain of our competitors. What we found, though, is because there's such a broad array of categories covered by fresh, chilled and frozen, you could have someone in dairy speaking to someone who makes beef, and even though they both work with cattle, they might not have had conversations before. So it's allowing people to speak across different bits of the supply chain. But I think it's fair to say there is some competition, and that probably drives some of our levels of engagement. It's quite similar to if you tell me Tesco are doing something, I want to do it better. So we have a nice healthy mix of a little bit of competition, but a lot of broader collaboration. Okay,
that's interesting. That's not necessarily what people expect from companies that on the face of it might be competing. Are there any other surprises or things that you found unexpected as benefits through the programs? Laura, why don't you go?
I think for me, it's those relationships that have built up between businesses that wouldn't historically ever have had an opportunity to speak to each other. They sit in very different categories. On the face of it, they provide very different products, but they'll have a lot of similar issues, and seeing them work together and sharing things. And I think it's also been refreshing to see how open everyone is with ASDA. Having a trading team involved means that people could get slightly scared because they are the buying managers at the end of the day who are after the best price, but everyone's got really behind it. And especially, I think year 1 and year 2 were a lot slower, but this last year things have really ramped up, and it's all been down to what our suppliers have been doing with each other rather than any specific ASDA-driven activity.
Sure. So enabling the suppliers to participate, making it easy for them and accessible, is what's been making the difference. And how about yourself, Matt?
I think for me a couple of things stand out. The first is, as a platform, I mentioned it's a really powerful way to engage a large number of people, and we've used it to connect our suppliers to our customers, in the sense that we've had our customers come and talk about what's really important to them. For example, the NHS Sustainable Development Unit came and talked about what it was trying to do in this space. And our suppliers found that really motivating to then be able to take back to their businesses and say, well, hang on a minute, it's not just our customer, it's our customer's customer that is asking for this. And also we formed a steering team, and we had, probably twice, maybe even 3 times the number of volunteers I expected from the pool that we had, who wanted to actively get involved and help shape and design the programme to be as effective as possible. I didn't expect that at all. And that is an active team that continues today, and we meet, and that is, 6 different companies, very different relationships, collaborating together to drive value in this space. So for me, and then the last thing, just asking people if they want the exchange to continue, and overwhelmingly people have said they want the exchange to continue. So even though initially there was some scepticism, even though they thought it potentially would add more time, there'd be more expectation from GSK, the overwhelming feedback is we really support this, we want to see more of it. So those are the three surprises for me.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So I think we have time for just a couple more questions now. So the next one I'm interested that we've seen coming through from many of the audience is, what has been the biggest challenges in getting the programme up and running and getting it to the stage that you have? Matt, why don't you go?
I think for us initially it was developing a business case and moving GSK as an organisation along to show that this is something to be successful we needed to do. As I said, we started in 2010 with a value chain impact reduction approach, and we only launched the GSK Innovation Exchange in 2014. So we tried lots of traditional methods of engagement, collaboration before we arrived here. So we almost had to fail before we could start. And then building the business case was quite challenging because it requires a leap of faith. You've heard, or we've talked about the savings and what's the model, how are we going to get that back for the business. So there's a maturity level in the business, I think, where you need to reposition it for much more long-term benefit.
Right. Okay. Interesting. And Laura, how about from your perspective?
I think we were quite lucky at the beginning because there was a lot of buy-in, and we had a really senior leader, our then head of food, Barry Williams, was really behind the project and really got it. So we had a lot of buy-in, we had the budget, and we didn't have to do... Well, we had to do a lot to build the business case, but it could have been a lot harder. I think for us, it was getting to the critical mass point and getting our suppliers to it's great to say there's the golden rule and then we're not going to take these savings, but they need to see a couple of years of where that's actually happened and that they can trust us before they're really going to start sharing things and really getting involved. And I think that took 1 or 2 years, and that's just a process that takes time.
Okay, I can understand that. So, Laura and Matt, thank you very much for sharing your insights around these fully linked collaboration programs and the exchanges that you've been running for some years. My final question to you, my final request is, do you have a favourite anecdote or story about supplier engagement and involvement that sums up this value of collaboration from the work that you've been doing over recent years?
Yeah, I've got quite a easy one that if anyone's ever been to any of our SSE conferences, they'll have heard a million times, but we all really love it. So there's a really small company, a small bakery company that's on the SSE, and they had about 400 buckets that every week they were just throwing in the bin, and they wanted to find another way. They'd had a look at how they could recycle it and they were getting nowhere. So they jumped on the SSE, posed a question, and a slightly larger company had shared a case study a few weeks earlier, and our community manager, Nick, shared that back with them, and within 20 minutes they'd contacted the company, solved the issue, reducing their waste disposal costs and saving time and money for a really, really small company. So within 20 minutes they were saving 400 buckets a week, and that's just the kind of nice little thing that we really like seeing on the SSE.
Wow, immediate results. That's,
yeah.
Impressive. And Matt, how about yourself? Favourite anecdote?
Not so immediate results, but GSK manufactures toothpaste, which I'm sure most people are aware. We had a foaming toothpaste in an aluminium can with a bag in it. Very expensive, very heavy, quite a large footprint to it, and completely unprovoked, just through the theme of innovation. One of our packaging suppliers chose the Innovation Exchange to talk about its new packaging solution, which was a PET bottle with a bag in it. So that was shared with our packaging team, and they were delighted and have taken that forward to innovate around. So that's something we wouldn't have had sight of. Our packaging team hadn't engaged with the appropriate packaging team. So it was just a nice example of unsolicited innovation driving value.
Wow, again, a really nice example there, Matt. Thank you for sharing. So it sounds from what we're hearing from Matt and Laura that there are significant savings that are possible through enabling the supply base to collaborate together, but actually the benefits are far beyond that, through resilience in the supply chain, through reducing risks and sourcing innovation and really being able to drive growth. So thank you again so much for sharing those. So all that remains for me to do now is to say thank you to our panellists and you, the audience, for joining us this afternoon on our webinar on supplier collaboration. As I mentioned at the beginning, the webinar has been recorded and will be sent out as a link to all of the participants just at the end of the week. So do have a look at that. We will also be sharing again the white paper that we recently published in Procurement Leaders, featuring both Laura and Matt, describing how this works with examples and case studies. So it seems, from what we're hearing, that in an age where the balance of power is shifting from customer to supplier, where risks deep within the supply base have the potential to irrevocably damage brands at the far end and all the links in between, where competition for resources and supply of goods is becoming ever fiercer, a company's ability to build trust and value-added collaborative relationships with their supply base will become a significant competitive advantage. It's truly exciting at 2 Degrees to see companies like GSK and ASDA doing just that and sharing their experience with us. Thank you very much to all of the attendees and to the panellists. We hope to speak to you soon.